Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was Captain of Soul Reapers Part 1. Chapter 1. Plans. We could see a very handsome young man with yellow blonde spiky hair that reached his ears. His blue eyes shone like a diamond, but yet it held a great power and authority that showed that the young man was not to be messed with. The young man wore a black and white shirtsuit with no sleeves and black armbands. He also wore the traditional Shinigami captain's uniform with a sleeveless haori and an orange obi tied around his waist. That would be Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, captain of Squad 2 of the Gatei 13 and commander of the second largest organization beside the Gatei 13, which is the Onmitsukidem. He is known by many as the third official student of the Captain Commander Jinchuriki Yamamoto and was known to be a prodigy and a genius, having graduated under a year from the Shino Academy. After his mentor Itachi had gotten exiled, Naruto had to pick up the slack and make sure that the Onmitsukidem would pull through without their leader. He had continued doing his duties as a lieutenant of Squad 2 with the purpose of honoring his mentor Itachi and due to his diligence that he was promoted to his position after having been recommended. Right now, the Onmitsukidem had started to gain some standard under Naruto, who had made sure to answer to his subordinates' needs and expectations, which made him a great leader loved by many. Naruto had always believed that if you want the full loyalty of your subordinates, there should be a reward system where his subordinates are given rewards in order to motivate them to work hard. Despite that, Naruto was still strict and would give punishment if he believed that it was necessary. He was a fair leader who gave equal opportunity to everyone that worked under him, which is why the efficiency of work had increased, as everyone worked hard to not disappoint their leader. As for his lieutenant Soifin, she had been quite supportive of him and had always made sure to work diligently, just as Naruto had done previously when he held the position. It was no secret to everyone that Soifin had harbored romantic feelings towards Naruto. Her obsessive tendency was similar to her obsession with her mentor Itachi, so she always competed with the other women that were attracted to Naruto's charisma. That aside, the situation had been dire the past few days as Naruto arrived at a small cell that contained only a chair with a familiar person who had her back to him. Her shirtsuit was completely white, showing that her Riatsu was gone or in her case was being suppressed by the Mjyoku that was sealed inside her by a certain humble and perverted shopkeeper. Damn you, Kisuke, Naruto thought, knowing that Kisuke had probably done this so he can expose Aizen and have Soul Society acknowledge his and the other exiled Soul Reapers' innocence, or maybe Kisuke was genuinely hoping to hide the Mjyoku, or maybe he wants him to confiscate it. You've really gotten yourself into a big mess, Rukia. Naruto spoke, his tone was soft, and there was no hint of anger or disappointment. Rukia turned to face Naruto, she was definitely surprised to see Naruto again after all those years. Having been adopted by the Kichiki family, she was unable to see him or Renji as she used to, but Naruto on the other hand, had tried to visit her unlike Renji, who had practically almost given up because of the difference in status. Naruto, what are you doing here? Asked Rukia as she cautiously looked at Naruto, who smiled at her gently, if only to give her comfort. I came to check on you, of course. Said Naruto like it was the most obvious thing, while Rukia had a bitter look on her face remembering her altercation with Renji the previous day. I'm gonna be executed, Naruto said, Rukia accepting her fate, but her only worry is that Ichigo would come here and make a ruckus that might lead to his death as well. When she stayed in the living world and had started teaching Ichigo about being a Soul Reaper, she never expected to get close to the boy who was much younger than her, but maybe because Ichigo had reminded her of Kane Shiba and she unknowingly found herself getting close to him and forming a friendship that she had come to value greatly. I'm aware of that, you've really put yourself into a very tight position, but I assure you that you won't be executed as long as I and those who believe in you are still around. Said Naruto, which definitely got a reaction from Rukia, who turned to look at Naruto in surprise. I already know about Renji's situation and I'm quite disappointed in him for doubting the bond between the two of you, but that idiot will come around as well once he stops trying to think about those unnecessary power gaps and status. Said Naruto, while Rukia gained a softer look, appreciating the encouraging words from Naruto. Thank you, I'm really grateful, said Rukia, which Naruto nodded before with a hidden finger motion. Rukia started to fall asleep in her seat. He had visited Rukia's cell for another reason, aside from checking on her well-being, and that is to extract the Mjyoku. Naruto then opened the cell knowing that he had limited time to do what he came here to do. In his pocket was another Mjyoku, but this one was a faulty one. He was going to replace Kisuke's Mjyoku with his own version in order to fool Aizen and make sure that Rukia would survive by the end of the whole ordeal. Naruto walked out of the barrack with a straight face, being flanked by Soifin, who looked at Naruto in concern. They were playing a very dangerous game. They don't really know if Aizen is watching them or not, but they have been taking extreme safety precautions to ensure everything would go smoothly. Do you really think he would fall for it? Asked Soifin. Her voice was low to allow only her and Naruto to communicate. Yes, that guy is quite arrogant and overconfident in his strength. He might be on guard around me, but he still doesn't see me as a threat to his plans. He wouldn't expect that I had everything planned beforehand," said Naruto with a smile on his face, while Soifin nodded her head admiring her captain's tactics. Naruto was constantly sending pulses in the ground to sense the surrounding area and ensure that nobody was spying on them. He then turned towards Soifin and leaned to give her a kiss on the lips, which she accepted happily. She was quite lucky to have gotten in a relationship with Naruto, and she was quite smug about it to the other women that had competed for Naruto's attention. "Now then, I will head to sensei to hand it to him," said Naruto, making sure that he doesn't mention the name of them Gyokure, which Soifin nodded her head at. Using flash step, Naruto had headed towards the Squad 1 barrack to meet with his sensei. It actually didn't take long for him to reach his destination before he made it inside the office, knowing that his sensei and the others that he requested were made present. "Did you complete the task, Captain Namikaze?" asked the captain commander, which Naruto nodded as he sent another pulse to check the surrounding area, which was clear. Naruto then looked at his sensei and his seniors, which were Gyokure Mukitake, Kamraku Shunsui and Unohana Retsu. Naruto then pulled them Gyokure and kneeled in front of his sensei before handing over the weapon that Kisuke had foolishly created. Yamamoto took the small bluish-purple orb from Naruto's hand and frowned when sensing the pressure that was being emitted and shuddered at the thought of what Aizen had planned to do with the orb. "Excellent job, you've served Soul Society well," said Yamamoto proudly as the others smiled at Naruto, who stood up and raised his head, smiling at the praise given to him by his own sensei. Yamamoto then hid them Gyokure inside a Kido spell, in which he decided to deal with later until the situation with Aizen is resolved. Yamamoto was quite grateful for Naruto's quick thinking. If it weren't for that, he might have acted rashly in trying to eliminate Aizen and the other traitorous captain. It was only thanks to the persuasion of Naruto along with Gyokure Mukitake, Kamraku Shunsui and Unohana Retsu that he had accepted to follow the plan that was agreed upon by the 5 of them. Flashback, "What?" shouted Yamamoto loudly, being angered by the revelation made by Naruto and the others. He was surprised when Naruto had come to his office with his 2 other students and Unohana. Naruto flinched at the look of outrage in his sensei face, but maintained a straight face since he was being supported by his seniors, so he felt a little bit of comfort in coming to the office. "I'm afraid this is the conclusion that we had arrived at, head captain." It was Unohana that decided to press forward. She was as old as Yamamoto himself, so she decided to lighten the burden on Yamamoto's students by taking the lead in the conversation. Yamamoto sat in his chair gripping on his cane that was secretly his weapon in disguise. "So you're telling me that 3 of my own captains have been working against me?" said Yamamoto. The notion that 3 of his captains are betraying him left a bitter taste in his mouth, especially someone like Aizen, who is well liked by everyone. "Yes, I don't technically have any concrete evidence aside from the testimony of the exiled Orochi Shimen, Kisuke Urahara and Tessite Tsukubishi, who had recounted to me the events that led to their exile, along with my own secret investigation that I had launched to determine Aizen's goal," said Naruto. This time he was the one who talked. "So you're admitting that you've helped the escape of convicted Soul Reapers?" Yamamoto asked, frowning at Naruto, who flinched a little but gained a steely look. "Yes, I do admit that I've assisted them in their escape from Soul Society. I will accept the punishment later, but I did this in the belief that my own mentor and Captain Orochi Shimen would not dare betray Soul Society unless with a very solid reason, and I was proven correct," said Naruto as he looked at his sensei eyes, who looked disappointed, but at the same time, there was a hint of pride. "It's honestly concerning how something like this was happening underneath our noses. I don't think Naruto is fully at fault here, since he was acting on his instinct and his loyalty towards Captain Orochi, who had played a crucial role in his development as a Soul Reaper," said Gyokure, trying to remove any heat that would be directed at Naruto. "Besides, we learned that Aizen had been playing us for a fool for so long. His convincing act of a good guy had definitely tricked us completely. I've always wondered why he was so eager to show us his shikai. It turned out to be just a ceremony for his illusion ability or something similar to it to take a hold of us," said Kamraku, feeling somewhat bitter that he hadn't found his behavior suspicious. Yamamoto, who got over his slight anger towards Naruto assisting exiled Soul Reapers, had immediately directed his anger at the 3 traitorous captains as he stood up ready to head to where Aizen and the other 2 captains reside and burn them to ash, but he was intercepted by Unohana, who placed a hand on his chest to calm him down. "What are you doing, Captain Unohana?" asked Yamamoto angrily, but Unohana gave him a glare that told him to calm down. "It's unbefitting for someone of your position to quickly lose his temper. If you were to attack Aizen and his allies, that would only lead to more problems for Soul Society. I suggest you hear out what we have to say before making any rash decisions," said Unohana as the 2 got into a heated glare that made Naruto, Gyokure and Kamraku nervous before Yamamoto gave up and took a seat. "Very well, I'm listening," said Yamamoto as he took deep breaths to calm down his nerves. He had only relented because he was secretly afraid of Unohana and because he also respects her. Right now, it is extremely dangerous to attack Aizen and the others head-on, as it would cause a lot of problems. Captain Shinji Hirako was one of the few people closest to discovering Aizen's intention, and he was taken out of the equation by Aizen, along with those who are close to Captain Shinji, in order to prevent anybody from discovering his identity. Revealed Naruto as Yamamoto listened, understanding the severity of the situation. That aside, Aizen had played his role as the benevolent Soul Reaper quite well and had attracted a lot of admirers who respected him and followed him. He had mostly targeted young Soul Reapers, especially students from the Shin Academy, in order to instill loyalty into them, so if we were to attack him, it would lead to a civil war, which would be beneficial for Aizen's future goals. Continued Naruto as Yamamoto had calmed down even more, being able to think rationally and was able to understand where Naruto was coming from. That's not to mention his Zanpakuto mobility. If I'm being honest, attacking Aizen right now is risky, considering that we might not be sure if we're really attacking the real one to begin with, not to mention there is the concern that Central 46 might actually be Aizen pulling the strings from behind the scene. The one who spoke this time was Chikshurm, who had a grim look on his face which was mirrored by Kamraku. If we were to take the words of our former exiled captains to truth, then there might be another problem in the form that Aizen might be attempting to create his own army of hollows, or he might have already created an army already and is waiting for the chance to strike against us. Said Unohana, this time she threw her input which left Yamamoto with a headache. This is very concerning. What do you suggest I should do considering that you're all completely against my methods of eliminating those traitorous captains? Asked Yamamoto while Naruto nodded his head. Aizen is currently attempting to get his hands on the Mjyoku, which is in the possession of Kisu Kurohara. It seems the Kisu creation is the key that would help with Aizen's ultimate goal of creating a successful holification, but right now, Kisu had confiscated the Mjyoku in order to help stabilize the former captains who were put under holification by Aizen. Naruto said, revealing Aizen's plans which surprised Yamamoto. Until we could somehow confiscate the Mjyoku from Kisuke, we could ensure that part of Aizen's plans are ruined, since it seems that his plans are centered on the Mjyoku, but we need a bait, in which I mean that we need to create a faulty version of the Mjyoku, so Aizen would be forced to reveal his hands to us. Said Naruto, which everyone nodded. Right now, he's on guard around us, so we need to give him a fake sense of safety. That his plans are going smoothly and that he managed to fool us all, but in reality we already know of a portion of his plans. This will lead him to get overconfident and arrogant, which would let him start dropping his guard. Said Naruto as Yamamoto contemplated Naruto's plans. This is my own humble opinion. Said Naruto as everyone gave a nod at Naruto, knowing that he was asking them to add on to the plan and alter it if they deemed it too compromising. Yamamoto gained a steely look after contemplating everything that was said so far before he decided to further discuss the plans on how to effectively deal with Aizen Sasuke and his supporters in the form of Captain Jin Ichimaru and Kanam Tausen. End of flashback. Now that we have them Mjyoku, we can now continue with our plans. Said Yamamoto as he looked at each individual in the office. I'm sure all of you know your roles quite well, so make sure that no one suspect anything. Said Yamamoto, which Kamraku grinned at. Don't worry Yamaji, we have everything under control. Said Kamraku as he gave his sensei a thumbs up, which Yamamoto let out a sigh, sincerely hoping that everything would end okay. I will continue doing my duties as expected from me too. Answered Unohana with a sweet smile as she turned to leave, clearly satisfied with seeing the dangerous weapon created by Kisuke being confiscated. I think I will do the same as Captain Unohana, said Chikshurm as he let out small coughs from his disease before he decided to relax a little in his squad barracks while also thinking about saving Rukia from her execution, but they need to be careful, especially when dealing with someone as stubborn as Byakuya Kichiki. While Lieutenant Soifin is already ensuring that our patrol and everything related to our squad remain relatively the same to not garner any suspicion. I will continue doing what I usually do to divert suspicion. Said Naruto, giving a nod that he had already planned to do that from the start, which Yamamoto nodded in satisfaction. Kamraku immediately took this opportunity to throw his arm around Naruto's shoulder as he pulled his junior to the exit door. Come on, let's have a drink, Naruto said Kamraku enthusiastically, which Naruto didn't resist, instead followed with a smile. Well, I don't mind having a few drinks, this has been such a nerve-wracking year. Said Naruto, which Kamraku nodded his head, agreeing with how troublesome the situation had been those past few couple years when dealing with Aizen, who had been suspiciously spying on them but had been terrible at it now that they knew of his intention. The only problem is his Shikai ability that made them take a lot of safety precaution to ensure that nothing can interrupt their plans. It was very risky, but Aizen had started to let his guard down just like they had expected and had stopped spying on them and instead had been focused on his goals that were approaching rapidly in the form of Rukia Kichiki carrying them Mjyoku, but he was unaware that Naruto had already left him a gift that he would definitely remember for the rest of his life. Aizen was chuckling to himself with how his plans had been advancing quite quickly than he anticipated. He had been monitoring any suspicious behavior, especially from the captain of Squad 2 Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, a boy with so much potential that it fascinated him, but it seems that his worries were unfounded, since it seems that Naruto was not aware of anything. Are you sure that dropping your guard around that boy is the right thing to do, Aizen-sama? Asked Tausen, being the only one who was still quite concerned about Naruto being clueless. He knows that Naruto is much more cunning than this, he must know at least something, especially after his own mentor Urashi had been framed. Aizen, who was sitting in a much more luxurious chair, was sipping on the tea that was offered to him by Kanem before he looked at the blind captain with a smirk that showed confidence. Do not fret, Kanem, I've studied Namikaze quite well to know that he isn't capable of interfering with our plans. Urachi's supposed betrayal has affected him just as much as it affected his lieutenant Soifin, so our plans of achieving them Jyoku are approaching. Said Aizen, confidently believing that Naruto behavior around him was just what the humans in the living world called teenage rebellion phase. Jin, who was leaning on the side, has his ever-permanent smile that eerily reminded everyone of a fox as he looked at Tausen. You're worrying a little too much, Kanem. Aizen-sama had planned everything even before Naruto-kun was conceived in his mother's womb. Said Jin in a mocking tone. I see, I may have worried a bit too much, given the boy's reputation around as a prodigy and a genius of his generation. Said Tausen, trying to give a reason for his worry, but Aizen had dismissed his worries with a smile. Jin, on the other hand, looked at Aizen with well-hidden contempt. That overconfidence of yours will be your undoing, Aizen. I will never forgive you for what you did to Ranjiku, and I will make sure you pay your sins with your life. Jin thought he knew that Naruto is probably aware to some degree about Aizen's plans. If he was able to join Aizen inner circles, then Naruto was probably aware of everything to some degree. What are your next moves, Aizen-sama? Asked Tausen, being quite loyal towards Aizen's goals, as in his own eyes, Aizen was the one who will bring justice to this world. We wait for the Ryokas that will undoubtedly come to Soul Society in order to save Rukia Kachiki. We will add fire to the chaos by faking my own death and have the Soul Reapers turn against each other, which would help cover our tracks enough to further completion of our plans. Said Aizen as he rested the palm of his hand on his cheeks. I fully understand, said Tausen, submissively acknowledging Aizen as his superior as he poured more tea for his leader, who accepted Tausen's kind gesture. Chapter 2. Ryoka Invasion. The large alarm rang through the Sirte as Naruto could be seen sitting in his own office, filling his own paperwork before he looked at the roof of his office with a knowing look. Everything that went on in Sirte was known to him to some extent. He was chosen to be the captain of Squad 2 and commander of the Onmitsukan for a reason other than the fact that he was quite powerful. The door to his office was opened, revealing Soifin, who looked at Naruto with a smile. It's just like you anticipated, those stubborn Ryoka actually came to save Rukia. Said Soifin while Naruto smiled at hearing the confirmation of the news. Well, things are about to take an interesting turn. Said Naruto as Soifin walked towards Naruto, taking a seat in his lap, which he immediately pulled her close to him. Do you think they'll actually succeed? Asked Soifin. She was quite surprised that the Ryokas would invade the home of Soul Reapers while being less prepared for the risks. Assuming that Urachi-sensei and Kisukirahara were the ones that granted them access to Soul Society, then I'm pretty sure they have a fighting chance, since I doubt sensei will send them to their death like that over saving a Soul Reaper, especially when she knows that I and select few wouldn't allow the execution to happen. Said Naruto before he took a thinking pose. You know, their fighting chance might as well skyrocket, since most of the captains and lieutenants in the Gate 13 had grown comfortable in the peace and prosperity that Soul Society is currently experiencing right now. As a captain, it's embarrassing to admit this, but most of my colleagues had also grown arrogant and overconfident. The idea that a Ryoka, much less a novice Soul Reaper like ichigokurosaki, who barely grasped the basics, could best a Soul Reaper with a century of experience is something they wouldn't ever think about. Naruto said, adding his own analysis. Soifin lit up when hearing the name of her sensei being mentioned. If Naruto words are to be taken seriously, then Urachi might be accompanying them in a disguise or something, considering that she's a convicted Soul Reaper. That means that Urachi-sama is with them, said Soifin, which Naruto nodded with a smile. Yes, even though they're allowed to do something as stupid and reckless as invading a powerful military force like the Gate 13. Urachi-sensei would be following them if only to serve as a guide, since she would know the secret entrances and exits to Soul Society. Said Naruto with a smile, which Soifin nodded happily. She was still the same person who looked up to Urachi as a role model and admired her to the point of worshipping her. What are we going to do? Asked Soifin curiously, since despite being a very good tactician herself, Naruto was still a person who could come up with very unpredictable plans that surprised the enemy. Even Aizen of all people was unable to get a good read on Naruto. We won't interfere in the chaos that is bound to happen once the Ryoka find a way inside the Sirte. We need to keep watch over Aizen and his band of traitors, because Aizen is still a very dangerous man who would probably use the chaos from the Ryoka and fuel it even more to get the attention off him. said Naruto while Soifin hesitantly nodded her head. Don't worry, the Ryoka goals are to rescue Rukia from her execution. I doubt they will be going for the kill, since it will only make them a threat and they will be attacked from all sides. Said Naruto, which Soifin understood the logic behind his words and agreed. I can't wait for this whole conflict to end quickly. Soifin expressed herself merely because she wanted to spend more time with Naruto. Me as well, said Naruto before he pulled Soifin for a deep kiss, which she immediately wrapped her arms around his neck to enjoy this simple moment between the two of them. She really felt lucky and blessed to be with the man she loved for so long. Ichigo could be seen holding onto a pole that is the spirit core, trying to focus his spiritual energy into it to form a shield, which Kaku had referred to as a cannonball, due to the method in which they will enter the Sarate. Given that their first attempt at entering the Sarate through defeating one of the 4 gatekeepers had failed when a captain had foiled their plans, trying to repeat the same tactic would be stupid of them. Their only last method to enter the Soul Society would be through the barrier, but that would be near impossible, given that the barrier is made from an ore known as sekiseki, but Kaku had ways to penetrate the barrier, and this depended on Ichigo to be able to form a cannonball, which he was failing at terribly given his immeasurable spiritual power, and because Ichigo was a complete novice who couldn't do a kid to save his life. Iruchi, who was in her cat form, let out a sigh. She had hoped that Ichigo wouldn't give her such a hard time. You really have no talent in this, Ichigo. I had hoped that you'd be like Naruto, said Iruchi. She wasn't trying to hurt Ichigo's feelings in this, but considering that Ichigo had wanted to save Rukia, if he continued with such a slow pace, then he might not be able to accomplish that goal of rescuing Rukia from her execution. Ichigo scowled at Iruchi. He didn't know who this Naruto guy was, but he didn't like being compared to others. Before he could complain, another scary and familiar voice interrupted Iruchi. Are you seriously comparing that delinquent to that handsome and desirable man? Asked Kaku. While she may not be as competitive as the other women that had chased for Naruto affection, but she herself had to admit that Naruto was everything that a woman would want from a man. Oh ho, I didn't know you were interested in Naruto-kun. Asked Iruchi with a grin that carried mischief while Kaku smirked. Why shouldn't I be interested? You've been hogging him for yourself and never even introduced me to him. Said Kaku while Ichigo's scowl deepened while the others looked confused at the interaction between Kaku and Iruchi. Boy, who the hell is this Naruto guy that you people are babbling about? Asked Ichigo loudly, obviously frustrated. Iruchi focused her gaze at Ichigo and the others who accompanied Ichigo in his mission of rescuing Rukia. Naruto is someone you shouldn't ever mess with under any circumstances unless you have some death wish. Said Iruchi, warning the stubborn Ichigo, who would probably challenge Naruto if the chance ever presented itself, while Ichigo scowled, not satisfied with the answer. Is he really that strong, Mr. Iruchi? Asked Orihime. Obviously she was concerned, while Uruk felt uneasy since he wasn't as stubborn as Ichigo, to not realize that Naruto might be an incredible foe. You kids have no chance against him. Even if you all band together to try and defeat him, you won't even get him to take the fight seriously. Iruchi's tone was serious, which made them shiver by the implication. Iruchi then glanced at Ichigo. That means that you shouldn't stubbornly try to fight him. No matter what kind of power-up you pull in the fight, it won't change the outcome of the fight because you're nothing more than a speck of dust in his eyes. So if you were to ever meet him, you turn around and run as far as you can and don't look back. Said Iruchi while Kaku scoffed at Iruchi's comment. That is, if he can run away to begin with. You seem to forget that he's rivaling you in speed. The kid will be taken out before he can even get the chance to blink. Said Kaku while the others became increasingly worried. Can we at least get some kind of description or a photo so we make sure we don't antagonize him or hopefully manage to avoid him? Said Uruk, being the most reasonable out of everyone aside from Chad himself, who had agreed with Uruk. So what? Said Ichigo loudly, being the moron he is. He pulled his large cleaver sword and pointed it towards Iruchi with determination in his eyes. Even if this Naruto guy is strong, we will have to defeat him if he were to stand in my way from rescuing Rukia. Said Ichigo stubbornly. Were you even listening to me, you damn moron? I'm telling you to avoid him. That means you shouldn't antagonize him. If you even think that swinging that stupidly large sword of yours would make a difference, then you must be delusional. Yelled Iruchi, being completely frustrated with Ichigo, who was being quite stubborn. I think she's right, Ichigo. It's best if we avoid antagonizing him. Said Chad, being the voice of reason. Ichigo relented after seeing that everyone was against him in this, so he sat on the ground with his arm crossed and a frown on his face. What if he attacks us? Are you telling us to just run away like cowards? Asked Ichigo, being upset with the whole situation. I have to agree with Ichigo. If he's as formidable as you say he is, then we might not be able to run away, and the only option is to fight him. Said Uruk, adjusting his glasses. Don't worry, he won't attack you because he himself is a friend of Rukia, so he won't attack any of her human friends. Said Iruchi, surprised them once more and made them sigh in relief. You should have said that first before you made us think that we will be facing him as an enemy, shouted Ichigo, being completely pissed, especially that he actually thought he would be fighting someone so dangerous. I didn't say he was your enemy, but rather I explicitly said to not antagonize him. That means you, Ichigo, shouldn't try to challenge him in a duel because he will destroy you," said Yuruchi while Uruk glared at Ichigo as if silently warning him to not do something stupid that would put them all in unnecessary danger. Haku then walked towards Orihime and handed her a picture in which she glanced at it and found herself slightly blushing when seeing a picture of a blonde man who is Naruto. Uruk Chad and Ichigo walked towards Orihime to look at the picture. "This is him, don't let his young appearance fool you. He's one of the most powerful captains in the Gate 13, being the commander of the second largest organization, which is the Onmitsukido. He's a natural-born prodigy and a rare genius. He's also the third official student of the head captain Yamamoto. That means he's even more powerful than the regular captain," said Kaku, giving them a little information on Naruto. "Head captain, sounds like a pretty important name," said Orihime loudly, with her imagination running wild like usual as she imagined the head captain as some kind of monster or a large scary dragon. Yuruchi simply nodded her head. "The head captain is the leader of the Gate 13, that means he is the strongest person and the oldest out of everyone. He had only 2 students, and Naruto had the honor to be his third official student, so his strength is no joke," said Yuruchi while Ichigo gulped slightly. "Now then, enough chatting and get back to creating a cannonball or we will lose daylight," said Kaku, returning to her violent demeanor as Ichigo rushed back to creating the cannonball. "Captain of Squad 3 Jin Ichimaru," spoke Yamamoto in a very calm tone as he stared at one of the traitorous captains with a sharp gaze as the captain walked inside the meeting room with a fox smile. "What's going on? I get called so suddenly and look at this crowd. The captains who control Soul Society are all here for me," commented Jin as he looked over the captains present in the room before his eyes fell on Naruto, who looked at him calmly. Hashirama glanced at Jin sharply before he chose to close his eyes, if only to not show his true emotion. He might be a very distinguished captain, but he knows his own weaknesses and that he can often get emotional when provoked. He didn't want to fail his best friend Naruto, who trusted him with a dangerous secret. "Maybe not," said Jin before he walked in the middle of the 2 rows where the captains were standing as he looked directly at the head captain, who was the only one who was taking seat. "The captain of Squad 13 isn't here. Did something happen to him?" asked Jin. Those who knew Jin affiliation can already see that he wasn't in the least bit concerned with Yuki take, but rather he was gouging their reaction. "He's out sick." It was Tausen who answered Jin's question. His voice was soft, and nobody could ever suspect someone like him who greatly valued justice, but he was a traitor who chose the wrong side. "Again? I hope he gets better soon," said Jin, his face showing fake concern for the captain of Squad 13. "Quite joking around," spoke a deep voice that was Kenpachi Zaraki as he glared at Jin. "You know you weren't summoned here for that. I understand you went and played with the Ryoka on your own. And I hear you failed. Explain yourself. You should have no trouble dealing with 4 or 5 Ryoka." Kenpachi practically ordered Jin to speak. Jin looked pretty much amused. "Oh, they didn't die then?" asked Jin, faking a surprise. "What?" Kenpachi asked, pretty much outraged by the question and how carefree Jin is about the situation. "Oh, I thought they were dead. My intuition sure has dulled," said Jin, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Naruto would have made snarky remarks at what Jin said, but refrained himself from doing so. He wants to see where this would lead to, considering how Aizen is currently glaring at Jin like he was some kind of enemy. "You can stop the monkey business," said Kuretsuchi with a creepy chuckle as he looked at Jin in the typical mad scientist eyes that looked like he was dissecting Jin with his eyes. "There's no way that captain-level guys like us would fail to tell instantly whether an opponent's Hakuto has ceased or not," commented Kuretsuchi, obviously saying that Jin had intentionally let the Ryoka escape. Hashirama looked rather annoyed as he watched what he would refer to as old men squabbling amongst each other. "There they go again, squabbling among old men," said Hashirama, his face looking away since it was painful to just watch the drama unfold before him. "Come on, you make it sound like I let him go on purpose," said Jin nonchalantly as one of his hands rested at the back of his head. "That's precisely what I'm saying," said Kuretsuchi firmly as he looked at Jin with a glare. "Shut up, Kuretsuchi. I'm talking to him now," interrupted Kenpachi as he stepped forward just as Kuretsuchi had done the same, pretty much ready to face off in the room. "Or do you want me to kill you?" asked Kenpachi, trying to intimidate a man who probably didn't fear death. "What did you say?" asked Kuretsuchi, daring Kenpachi to repeat his threat while Naruto let out a sigh. Naruto had always wondered why the captains of the Gate 13 couldn't be united. Most of the current captains were working for their own benefits. The only reason the Gate 13 was created was because of the will of one single man, and that is his mentor Yamamoto. "This conversation is getting nowhere," commented Naruto, which Tenshinhan nodded his head at, agreeing with Naruto. Shunsui pushed his straw hat a little down to conceal his face, but his mouth was enough to show his expression as he was smiling. "Oh boy, tempers are running high," commented Shunsui in a carefree tone, but he was tense. His gaze was secretly on Aizen, trying to get a read on the man's intention. It seems that the arguing between two captains had reached an all-time high until the captain commander himself decided to stop the squabble before it got too far. Enough of this, Yamamoto spoke, his tone was strict and heavy to the point that the two arguing captains had stopped to look at their leader. Yamamoto, who had both his palms resting on the cane, was staring at Jin with his eyes closed and with his usual expression of a frail old man. "But I think the reason why you have been summoned has been made clear," said Yamamoto, practically confronting Jin. "Acting alone and letting the target escape well. How do you defend your actions, Ichimaru?" asked Yamamoto, who knew that Jin wasn't going to give him a satisfactory answer, but this confrontation was merely a way to gauge the possible motive. "I can't," said Jin calmly, as if he wasn't standing a few feet away from one of the most dangerous people in the Sirte, a person who he shouldn't be antagonizing in the first place. "What did you say?" asked Yamamoto as one of his eyes opened to look at Jin sharply. "There's nothing I can say to defend myself. I made a simple mistake, I won't make excuses. I'll accept whatever punishment," said Jin, rubbing his head, pretty much not concerned about the consequences since he doubted they would go so far as to punish him when they're in the middle of an invasion made by the Ryoka. "Just a minute, Ichimaru," spoke Aizen in a calm tone. The moment Aizen had opened his mouth and Naruto, Shunsui, Yamamoto, Anohana and Tsushima gazes fell on Aizen, but it was well hidden. "First, let me ask you something," said Aizen as he stepped forward to look at Jin, as if he's looking at a suspicious person. Jin stared at Aizen with what appeared to be an even more intense fox smile. It seemed that Jin was saved when a large alarm went off as a voice could be heard projected in the Sirte. Urgent alert, intruders in the Sirte, all squads get into position, I repeat," said a random Soul Reaper, before he continued to repeat the alert a second time, for those who hadn't properly heard. "Intruders?" asked Aizen in a fake surprised tone as he looked at the rest of the current present captains. "Those Ryoka?" questioned Kenpachi, a little surprised but excited at the same time to face those Ryoka and kill them. Jin still maintained a wide smile as his eyes were closed. Running footsteps could be heard as Aizen turned to look at Kenpachi, who was heading out of the meeting room as he looked shocked. "Hey wait, Kenpachi!" Aizen called out for Kenpachi, who ignored him and was already gone at this point to chase after the strongest of the Ryoka. "There's no choice, this meeting of squad captains is dismissed for now," said Yamamoto as the remaining captain looked at the head captain. "I shall inform you later how Ichimaru will be dealt with," said Yamamoto as Jin still smiled, not in the least bit concerned by the punishment. "All squads will report immediately to their battle stations," ordered Yamamoto as he opened one of his eyes to make his orders clear to the current present captain. All captains started to leave the room calmly, with Shunsui passing by Jin. His gaze fell on the traitorous captain momentarily before he left the room. Naruto had stayed a little behind because he saw Aizen approaching Jin and he wanted to listen in on their chat. "The warning certainly came at a good time for you," said Aizen. His tone was confrontational, which Naruto narrowed his eyes slowly. "I don't understand quite what you're trying to say," Jin answered, feigning ignorance and probably playing his act well. "You think you can get away with it? You'd better not take me too lightly," threatened Aizen as he walked away, leaving Jin with a smile and a very concerned Tsushima. Naruto on the other hand had a calm expression. "What is your endgame, Aizen?" Naruto thought he knew that Aizen would probably want to divert attention from himself as much as possible, and the Ryoka that are currently invading Soul Society are the perfect scapegoat. What could he possibly want from acting hostile around Jin? This little confrontation is obviously intentional, it's as if he wants us to hear him confront Jin. Naruto thought as he walked away, his mind racing trying to predict Aizen's intention. One thing is for sure, Aizen wants to paint Jin as a traitor in front of others. To make it sound like Jin is the one pulling the string, but Aizen is the one who is actually pulling the string. Aizen is loved by many of his subordinates and Soul Reapers, certainly if anything were to happen to him everyone will shift the blame on the likely suspect, which is Jin. Thought Naruto as he had come to realization as to what could Aizen be hoping to probably achieve. This will lead to us turning against each other. This is really bad, thought Naruto with a frown, realizing that many would start pointing fingers at each other and that would lead to fights among each other as he stared at Tsushima, who had a grim look on his face, having come to the same conclusion that he came with. "Tsushima, make sure you prevent Aizen from making any possible contact with Hinamori. If anything, make sure that you check anything he might leave for her, such as a letter," said Naruto in concern, which Tsushima nodded grimly. Tsushima didn't need to be told twice since he already figured that Aizen wanted to turn everyone against each other and would probably enjoy turning Momo against him. Hopefully, it wouldn't come to this, but if he were to successfully manage to turn Momo against him, then he will have to do something about it to ensure her safety. "I know," said Tsushima, which Naruto nodded his head in slight satisfaction before he decided to leave through Flash Step, leaving Tsushima to ponder how he should prevent any contact between the two of them. Chapter 3. Aizen on the move. Naruto had never been this disappointed in his life. So far the invasion made by the Ryoka to rescue Rukia had left an impact on the Sirte, and not a good one at that. Many low-ranking seated officers and unseated officers were easily defeated, but then again those people were just fodders, so he wasn't in the least bit concerned about them, since most of them happened to be from Squad 11, which is Zaraki's squad. Despite his respect for the bloodthirsty captain, his squad is the main issue. All of them were weaklings who liked to pick on those they considered weaker than them, especially Squad 4, which was led by Captain Unohanaretsu herself. They were nothing more than brutes who got way over their head due to their captain power. Aside from those useless fodder, what really disappointed him was those he knew were quite capable, such as Ikaku Madaram and Renji Aburai. Despite Ikaku being a third seat, he was already a lieutenant level in his own eyes, yet the guy had lost to a novice Soul Reaper like Ichigokurosaki. Ikaku had only lost because he got way over his head and was confident in his own victory, which is why he had lost. That aside, Kisuke had trained Ichigo well enough to have him ignore the gap in strength and defeat an opponent far stronger than him, so he can at least give some credit to Ichigo. Renji on the other hand had put up a good fight compared to Ikaku, but it's only because Renji knew that Ichigo was powerful due to their first meeting in the human world, where he lost because of his restriction, but now that the seal was removed, Renji was able to have Ichigo on the ropes. Still, Renji had lost once more because he got way too emotional, and that led to him getting way too reckless because of his conflicting emotions when it came to Rukia and Byakuya. Still, it seemed that Renji had finally woken up a little and realized that he was on the wrong side and decided to entrust Ichigo with the mission of rescuing Rukia. Naruto had to tolerate Byakuya, who had ended up imprisoning Renji, who was badly injured because he simply lost. Naruto wasn't going to say anything to Byakuya Kichiki, since it was not his place to criticize his methods of discipling his own subordinates. It would be better to have him as well learn a lesson on humility once Ichigokurosaki defeats him in battle. If this is how Soul Society military had come to, then they might as well get ready for defeat by their future enemies. The fights that he has secretly watched were extremely pathetic. The fact that they were struggling against Ichigo had shown him how much Soul Reapers have gotten way over their heads into believing that they're indestructible. This is all the more reason why he wasn't going to take part in the fight. Aside from the fact that he had better things to deal with, such as dealing with Aizen and his band of traitors, he also wanted to see how far Ichigo would go in Soul Society. This could also be an important lesson for some of the morons in the Gate 13 to get their act straight before it's too late. He was sure that Yamamoto-sensei would chew everyone out for their pathetic performance against a bunch of weak Ryoka, especially a human Ryoka who is actually 16 years old. That would be really embarrassing if a captain were to actually lose against a child. Naruto stood at the roof of one of the buildings as he watched his target walking towards his private room. His frown deepened when he saw Momo Hinamori following the man inside. He knew that Tsushima wouldn't be able to restrict her movements completely because it would have been suspicious if he kept her around him for too long. Naruto then stepped away as he decided that he had enough watching over the guy for the day. Aizen was going to make his move either the next day or the day after. Time is of the essence, and Aizen can't waste too much time. Tsushima's fears had come into reality when he saw Momo Hinamori fighting the lieutenant of Squad 3 Azurukira. It was just like Naruto had predicted, Aizen was taking this to the next level, as if the already invasion made by the Ryoka wasn't enough. He was already pitting them against each other. The rest of both of them ordered Tsushima as his own Lieutenant Ranjiku, and Lieutenant of Squad 7 Tatsuzuma Naiba had restrained Momo, while Shikei Hisagi, who's the Lieutenant of Squad 9, had gone on to restrain Azurukira. Itsugaya-kun shouted the distraught Momo as she looked at her childhood friend, who looked at her strictly. "Inamori, is this any time to be clashing swords with each other?" Tsushima asked, being quite disappointed that Momo would fall so low as to attack a comrade like that, especially a captain like Jin who would kill her on the spot. "Shouldn't your first priority be to lower Captain Aizen down from there?" Tsushima asked, as despite his dislike towards Aizen, due to knowing the true nature of that man, he needed to avoid making himself suspicious. Momo seemed to gasp, realizing that in her own rage, she had forgotten about the state of her beloved Captain Aizen. "I will make the report to the head captain. Put those two under detention. Take them away," ordered Tsushima as Momo was carried away as she looked back at her deceased Captain Aizen before she closed her eyes shut. Tears were welling up in the corner of her eyes before she passed by Jin as she glared at him hatefully, while Jin was not fazed, instead he seemed to grin even more at her. "Sorry that you had to waste your time on one of mine, Captain of Squad 10," said Jin, giving a fake apology towards Tsushima, who was looking away trying to hide his anger. "Ichimari, you were about to kill Hinamori, weren't you?" asked Tsushima in a deadly tone, not even staring at Jin, but the tension between the two of them was getting intense. Now what are you talking about?" asked Jin, feigning ignorance, which obviously irritated Tsushima, who decided to give a threat to Jin. "I'll tell you this now, if you spill any of Hinamori's blood," said Tsushima as he turned to look at Jin with a cold look. "I will kill you," said Tsushima coldly. "That's scary, I'd better keep a close eye on her to make sure no bad guys get to her." It was obvious that Jin was taunting Tmshurm, who managed to better hold on to his emotion, and luckily for him some other small fries had rushed in and saw the state of Captain Aizen. Tmshurm had ordered them to get him down before he left the scene, wanting to avoid any confrontation with Jin, who can obviously get under his skin, but most importantly, he was going to check Aizen's room for anything that the so-called deceased captain may have left. Very few people knew this fact, but the Onmitsukidm is the safest place in the entire Surete. It was the safest place because of Naruto and Soifin working discreetly to fortify the Squad 2 barracks, so no unwanted eyes or ears could listen in on their conversation. This was made in order to discuss plans on how to deal with Aizen and his band. So far Aizen had been clueless about anything that went inside the Squad 2 barrack. Marichi Olmida, who was the third seed of Squad 2, have been the perfect scapegoat for them to fortify the entire base. Apparently, the snobby third seed had wanted to remodel the entire barrack to have heated floors and to have every door open and shut automatically. Of course he was going to pay from his pocket because of his family wealth, so he wasn't complaining, even though he knew that Marichia was going to run around, proclaiming that he was the one that remodeled the Squad 2 barracks and made it luxurious, but it was a small price to pay. He had to admit, for a guy whose brain is in his stomach, that was a good investment and it allowed them to make their own changes without anybody knowing it. There were also the spies that were sent by Aizen. Those people had been weeded out by having them get killed on missions, and nobody could really point fingers at him, since those spies were small fries that were promised rewards and fame, and they believed that he wouldn't take notice of his own subordinates, since he would be busy, or they assumed that he didn't care about the small fries in his squad. Not to mention, the operatives in his squad are considered faceless, meaning that they don't ever reveal their faces, not even to their comrades. That meant that he didn't know all the faces that are in his squad. As long as they wear the standard uniform of the Onmitsukidm and take missions from him, then there was no need to know their identity, even though before they could enroll in his squad, he has given background information on them. Those people had chosen this life. Nobody had forced them to join the squad, since everyone knows that those that join the Onmitsukidm are willing to throw their life away. Even then, he knows practically everything that goes around in his squad barracks. It would be really embarrassing for someone of his caliber to just overlook something as stupid as a spy running around his barracks unnoticed. Those people were small fries for a reason, and that's because they completely sucked at spying. Aside from that, Naruto dislikes traitors more than anything, especially those who would easily turn against their comrades. His own past and his death by the hand of his own teammate Sasuke Uchiha had left him quite bitter, so those who actually betray their comrades for power, money and fame are treated ruthlessly by him. If anything, they were killed since they were pretty much an eyesore for him. That's why we can see Naruto currently sitting in front of Tmshurm seeing his friend red in anger, which he honestly couldn't blame him. He had been right when he predicted that Aizen would attempt to pit the Soul Reapers against each other. This is why he had always told the head captain that each squad is acting independently and how the communication between different squads are poor and would end up being detrimental to them in the future if not solved. But just like always, his own sensei had to be a stubborn old man who has a hard time accepting change. Squad 11 prided itself as the strongest squad of the Gate 13 due to being a squad that specializes in combat. This pride had made them arrogant, which is why it's normal to see a seated or an unseated officer of Squad 11 bullying a member of Squad 4. This was a very unacceptable behavior that he didn't tolerate, and he had beaten some of their seated officers to teach them a lesson to not harass Captain Unohana's subordinates. Naruto let out a sigh as he reread the letter that was left by Aizen. It seems that Aizen had left a dying letter leaving his thoughts to his lieutenant Momo Hinamori. Under any circumstances, letters between captain and their own lieutenant was not the business of any squad, but considering that Aizen was supposedly dead, that meant that the letter he left behind for Momo would be submitted as evidence, which meant that regardless of Aizen's wishes, this letter would never reach her hands, nor will she ever know its existence. Not to mention, Aizen was a traitor. It was enough reason to read the letter and have it away from Momo. Tmshurm had done the right thing when he decided to read the letter before blindly handing it over to Momo Hinamori, who was already in a terrible mental state. The letter was obviously pointing at Tmshurm as the enemy. Essentially Aizen was pitting Momo against her childhood friend. A truly devilish scheme made by an evil man who had no qualms stepping on others and ruining relationships. How dare he, shouted Tmshurm angrily. The tea that was prepared beforehand seemed to have calmed him enough, but he was still angry. It was thanks to Naruto appearing out of nowhere and taking him away that he might have actually attacked Jin in his blind anger. You can't say that you didn't expect such an outcome, but I understand how you feel about this, said Naruto as he placed the letter in a kidden cube to keep the content of the letter safe. Still, why target me specifically? Tsushima asked, obviously frustrated with the whole situation. Hinamori admires him quite a lot, it can be even said that she worships him. You've seen how she had attacked Jin without even an ounce of care about the repercussion of her own actions. She's just a pawn for Aizen to fuel the conflict between Soul Reapers. He chose to leave a letter in the time where he supposedly died, that means at a time where her rational side is shaky. Said Naruto calmly, which made Tsushima bite his lower lip. You're also smart, Tsushima said Naruto as Tsushima looked at his friend quite confused. What I mean is that, Aizen knows that you're smart and more observant than most other captains in the Gate 13. It wouldn't have taken a long time for you to easily figure out that something was wrong about the whole situation and for you to start investigating around for answers. He's using Hinamori as a scapegoat to keep you busy long enough to disappear. Naruto carefully elaborated on Aizen's possible goal. Tsushima had calmed down even more, he was at least glad that the letter had not reached Momo, or he didn't think he would have the heart to face her in battle. He may be superior, but Momo was precious to him so he could never raise his blade against her. What should I do then? If the letter doesn't reach her, Aizen might suspect that something is wrong. Said Tsushima as Naruto nodded. Remember, Hinamori is a pawn to him. He technically doesn't fully expect the letter to reach her, and he already had himself as a saint by making Jin as the villain, so nobody will ever suspect him, instead people will think that it was fabricated by Jin, said Naruto, as Tsushima had to admit that Naruto had brought a good point. If you're concerned about it, there is another option which I doubt you will be up to, but it's your decision, not mine. I suggest you put Hinamori into a fake coma so she wouldn't do something as reckless as run away to find the truth. Said Naruto, which Tsushima was obviously against. The other option is that you make sure that she doesn't run away from her cell. The last thing we want is for her to rush to her own death by trying to once again attack Jin or snoop around at the wrong place and get herself killed by Aizen. Naruto offered another solution which Tsushima nodded his head at. I think I'm going to instead keep her confined for the time being, but I will have to make it less obvious so nobody would get suspicious of my behavior, but if things come to shove, then I might as well put her in a coma with the excuse that Aizen's death had affected her mental health. Tsushima stated his plan to Naruto, who nodded his head, being satisfied enough with Tsushima's resolve. I'm glad you have the resolve to go through something so difficult. If you ever need anything like bringing Hinamori here for her own safety, then I will make sure to prepare a room for her and we can come up later with an excuse. Said Naruto, which Tsushima greatly appreciated. I will keep that offer in mind, thank you, Naruto, I really needed to vent out a little. Said Tsushima, which Naruto understood where he's coming from. Don't mention it, we're close to each other in age, so I understand better how you feel about your childhood friend. I hope Aizen doesn't pursue her or try anything funny that would worsen her mental condition. Said Naruto, which Tsushima nodded his head. Well, I shouldn't bother you more than I already did, I will have to head for my squad to check on things. Said Tsushima while Naruto smiled at the young captain. You're no bother to me, Tsushima, take care of yourself, said Naruto. Tsushima nodded with a smile before he decided to leave the room to check on Momo health. Aizen, you're taking this too far, thought Naruto with a frown as his mind returned to the letter and its content. Poor Momo, she was manipulated quite well by Aizen to be submissive and dependent on him. Yasutoru Sato stared blankly at a Soul Reaper who was giving him the typical villain monologue that many Soul Reapers of all sizes had already given him. He decided to listen out of respect for the guy before he would send his fist flying towards the guy's face and send him to the sky unconscious. The man before him was a large beefy man with thick bushy eyebrows and long double-braided hair. He wears a customized version of the standard Shinigami uniform, which leaves the left side of his chest and abdomen bare. He has a tattoo of 3 Tomo, much like those featured upon the tsuba of his Zanpakuto, encircling each other on his left shoulder. You've come far enough, you foolish Ryoka, Tatsufusa said in a very exaggerated tone. I'm the assistant adjutant and 3rd seat of Squad 8. Tatsufusa Enjimjai Tatsufusa introduced himself, his exaggerated tone still remained as he looked down on the uninterested Sato. You have chosen the wrong path, said Tatsufusa, adding the typical evil laugh. From the moment I arrived here, this path is a dead end for you, announced Tatsufusa arrogantly as his hand immediately latched on his blade and drew it out, alarming Sato about the upcoming attack by the enemy. Tatsufusa had started swinging his sword in a random, almost idiotic fashion, while simultaneously making ridiculous sound effects with his mouth, making him look even more stupid. Now, what's the matter? Asked Tatsufusa loudly as he continued to swing his sword randomly. And make a move? Asked Tatsufusa as after each conversation he would return to making those ridiculous sound effects while looking at the unfazed Sato, who stared at the Shinigami blankly. Nothing to be ashamed of. That is normal. After all, this is the technique of the great swordsman, Tatsufusa Enjimjai, the small fry practically boasted. So far, not one has defeated. His monologue was cut short when Sato's Brazo Derecha de Gigante had found its way to his face, sending the moronic Soul Reaper to the air screaming. Yasutoru Sato felt somewhat relieved as he stared at his right hand, which was transformed and let out a small steam. In the beginning, 2 blasts a day was my limit. Now, I don't get tired even after firing more than 5 blasts. I need to thank Mr. Yuruchi for training me, thought Sato as he clenched his fist before he focused on the small building where the captain of Squad 8 was enjoying a drink and then took off running towards the building where he can exit the place and go help Ichigo. Wow, good job, came the voice of Shunsui as Sato tried to look at the culprit only to notice flower petals falling on the ground and looked upward to see the captain himself wrapped in his flower-patterned kimono and falling to the ground in a dramatic yet flamboyant fashion. I'm the captain of Squad 8, Shunsui Kamraku. Pleased to meet you. Shunsui greeted Sato with a smile as he looked at the kid in front of him that was part of the Ryoka. Squad 8 Captain, Sato repeated, despite his outward calm demeanor. He was obviously nervous. Yuruchi had told them to avoid confronting captains, and right now he was dealing with one. Yup, how do you do? Asked Shunsui in a friendly tone as he let out a chuckle before he noticed that the flower petal had started to increase as he looked at the balcony where his own lieutenant had been standing carrying a bag of flower petals. Hey Naruto-chan, that's enough flower petals, said Shunsui, but it seems that she wasn't in the least bit interested in his own desires, instead looked at him blandly as she continued to grab a fistful of flower petals and throw them at her captain. Maybe she didn't hear me. Hey, Naruto-chan. Hey, enough flower petals, cute Naruto-chan, lovely Naruto-chan, chanted Shunsui until Naruto picked the bag of flower petals and immediately dumped all the flower petals at him at once, completely drowning her captain. Before she lifted the bag of flower petals and launched it at Shunsui, hitting his head. Sato felt himself sweat dropping as he looked at one of the so-called captains of the Gate 13 acting in such a manner. He realized for his own sanity that he shouldn't question how Soul Reapers think. Sorry, but I don't have time for your skit, let me pass, said Sato. Still, regardless of the behavior of the captain, Sato knew that he was no match for the captain and hoped to avoid any confrontation by discouraging the man who seemed to be quite friendly from a glance. Shunsui was upset. He was hoping to discourage Sato from going further and get himself killed by some of the other merciless captains who would have no problem killing them for trespassing. What, can't you get in the groove a bit? Everyone's so indifferent, said Shunsui as he removed the bag of flower petals that fell on his head and picked his own straw hat, adjusting it on the top of his head. I'm in a hurry, please move aside. You don't seem like a bad guy. If possible, I don't want to fight you, said Sato, who pushed forward hoping to convince the friendly captain to let him through. You've got me there. Neither one of us wants to fight. But I can't let you pass, either. Isn't there any way you could just withdraw? Asked Shunsui, hoping to convince the young Ryoka to not throw away his life so recklessly. I can't do that, Sato responded calmly as Shunsui felt disappointed by the response that he had obviously expected from a mile away. I see. Then you leave me no choice, said Shunsui as he closed his eyes, obviously upset with having to resort to violence after failing to negotiate with Chad. Chad had obviously gotten into a fighting position knowing that there was no longer any room for negotiation, but it didn't mean that Shunsui wasn't going to once more try to reason with the stubborn young man before him. Regardless, Chad had reached the end of the line. Chapter 4. A mission. Zaraki was in the Squad 4 barracks being treated after his fight against the Ryoka, Ichigokurosaki. His body was bandaged, showing how much damage his own body had received from Ichigokurosaki. The Ryoka boy was truly formidable. He remembered being quite disappointed at the beginning when the boy had done nothing but run away and when the boy couldn't even pierce his skin with his large cleaver sword. He thought that Ikaku had lost to a loser and was planning on punishing his subordinate for slacking off so much. He thought it was the end when he broke Ichigo's Zanpakuto and pierced his chest, effectively killing Ichigo since his pulse has stopped, but the boy had somehow revived himself and had gotten a major power-up, being able to finally pierce his skin and have his own blood flying in the air. The rest of the fight was about attrition, about who could last longer than the other. Despite being the last one standing, his own Zanpakuto had shattered like glass and he fell unconscious, admitting defeat. Kenpachi Zaraki had never known defeat. There were only ever 2 people who had ever bested him in a fight, and the first one had left the battlefield, while the second one was a person who had too many responsibilities to ever entertain a battle. Naruto Namikaze was one of the few people in the Gate 13 that Zaraki had shown respect. He remembers that day when Naruto stood towering over him, bloodied with his blade pointing at him, and a very uncharacteristic bloodthirsty grin that you don't see on the face of the young captain of Squad 2. It was a grin that made his blood boil in excitement at seeing a hidden beast inside someone so young. Still, Naruto had practically admonished him for not knowing the name of his own Zanpakuto. He remembers feeling annoyed, but what Naruto told him that day made him start to think differently about his own Zanpakuto. He was just like his Zanpakuto, a nameless person who watched in envy as others are called by their own name, yet he didn't have a name in which people can call him by. It was very frustrating and he hated that feeling more than anything, and then he realized how his Zanpakuto must have felt when it tried to talk to him, well he treated it as a weapon to take life. He remembers giving his own lieutenant Yuichiro Kusajishi at the time a name by naming her after the first person that had given him the thrill of battle. The person he looked up to as an idol and wanted to surpass. Which is why when Ichigo had told him the very same thing that Naruto had done, he resolved to try even harder to learn the name of his Zanpakuto, if only to just grow even more stronger. Especially now that there are people who can defeat him, Ichigo may have fallen first, but the boy had proven that he was able to grow each battle. That in itself is a very terrifying ability that only few people ever possess, and by the end of the Ryoka invasion, he didn't doubt that the boy will be stronger than him. Zaraki raised his broken blade in the air as he stared at the fragile weapon that he had mistreated in the past. It will be a long journey before he can even deserve to know the name of his own Zanpakuto. After that, he's going to be able to fight in a lot of fun battles, and maybe he can get to have his rematch with Naruto and maybe Ichigo as well. You look all roughed up, Zaraki. Naruto spoke as Kenpachi turned his head to look at a smirking Naruto, and he couldn't help his own grin. Did you come here to see me? I'm touched, said Zaraki mockingly, but there was no heat, just squabbling between friends. Ah, fish cake, you're here, said Yuichiro, which made Naruto get a tick mark but decided to ignore the remark by the lieutenant since he was technically being punished by karma for all the pain he caused to the Sandame Hokage, the Godame Hokage and Jiraiya with his nicknames. Hello Yuichiro, you've been taking good care of Zaraki, Naruto said as she nodded her head happily. Ichi really gave Ken-chan a good fight. Commented Yuichiro, which Naruto could obviously see from the injury on Zaraki's body. I could see that, said Naruto before Zaraki decided to interrupt Yuichiro and Naruto. As much as I don't mind you two talking with each other, but I'm sure you didn't come here to catch up. Said Zaraki, which Naruto nodded. Well, you're quite sharp. That aside, I have a mission for you once you recover. Said Naruto, which got Zaraki's attention. Mission? Questioned Zaraki as he looked at the smirking Naruto, and he knew that the mission involved a battle to the death. It's just his intuition, and he couldn't help the excitement. Naruto walked towards Zaraki and whispered a few words to his ears, making his eyes shot wide open in surprise and excitement. What? Shouted Zaraki in shock as he looked at Naruto as if asking for answers. It's the orders of the captain commander himself. Make sure he doesn't live, or at the very least make sure he won't be able to play Shinigami again. Said Naruto, which Zaraki grinned savagely. What an interesting mission you've got there, Naruto. I've always wanted to kill that bastard. He's been pissing me off quite a lot about those talks of justice and those nonsense. Consider it done, said Zaraki with a grin which was mirrored by Naruto. I knew I could entrust such a mission to you, Zaraki. Make sure you have your own fun as well when killing him, but make sure to destroy him, also don't let him suspect anything. Said Naruto, which Zaraki nodded his head excitedly, his eyes gleaming. It seems his sword was going to have a taste of blood after all those years of so-called peace. Naruto then smiled as he backed into the dark corner, essentially disappearing in the shadows of the room. Yuichiro was curious as to what the mission was as she jumped next to Zaraki's bed. "En-chan, what kind of mission did Fishcake give you?" asked Yuichiro, whining for answers while Zaraki patted her head. "You will know what the mission is, Yuichiro. Still, it's best if we keep it a secret for the moment," said Zaraki. Many people might think he can only swing his sword around like an idiot, but Zaraki was still a warrior with a code of honor despite some of the questionable actions he made in the past. He knows how to keep a secret and he's good at keeping secrets. Naruto had given him this mission because it will be written off as him being the typical captain of the Squad 11, where people become captains by killing the previous one, and because Naruto trusts him enough to fulfill his job. If what Naruto said is true, then he's going to take his time enjoying killing that bastard in the most painful way. Who would have thought that someone who preaches about justice all the time is a traitor to his own people? Now that's something you don't get to hear or see every day. Still, he gets to fight a captain class and kill him, so he has no complaints. "Man, how scary," said Shunsui as he took a drink from his sake bottle as he stared at the boy he viewed as his own nephew. It was after he had taken down Chad that he had received the news of Aizen's supposed death and had finally understood what Aizen hoped to achieve. "I guess your intuition was right when you said that attacking Aizen back then would have only accelerated his plan," commented Shunsui as he was in the middle of playing cards with Naruto. "It wouldn't have done much for his plan, since he needed the last piece of the puzzle, which is the Mgyoku. I only said that we shouldn't antagonize him, because it would have been troublesome to deal with a civil war," said Naruto as he took a drink from the sake cup that he had next to him. "Still, a civil war would have done nothing but increase his standing in the Sirte. That would be really scary, considering that he might actually be able to easily manipulate young Soul Reapers to join his cause and paint us as the evil and corrupt Soul Reapers," commented Shunsui, which Naruto could understand where his senior was coming from. "Well, when you put it that way I think I understand," said Naruto while Shunsui smiled. Anyways, I heard you gave Zaraki a mission, said Shunsui. He obviously knew what the mission entailed, but he was more concerned since he wanted to persuade Tencent to drop any of his agenda. Yes, I did give him the mission. As much as I'd like to hold hope that Tencent would wake up, those who believe in their own justice can't be persuaded easily. I've learned that lesson a long time ago, said Naruto as Shunsui understood, given that he was one of the few people to know about Naruto's past and his death at the hands of his own teammate and brother figure. The old Naruto was so eager to change people by targeting their humanity that is hidden within his opponent. He was good at persuading people like Zabuza who had hardened his heart and killed innocent people without mercy, but yet he couldn't persuade his own teammate Sasuke Uchiha to see the light. The reason isn't because of his inability, if anything he should have been able to convince his teammate whom he had known the longest. The difference is that Zabuza's resolve was shaky, but Sasuke on the other hand believed that the path he is currently walking in is the right path and that any who stand in his path should be struck down. In a way Tencent was like Sasuke, the guy was driven by his own version of justice. He won't be convinced otherwise, and if not stopped, many people will be hurt because of it. I consider killing him a mercy. People like him will have to one day realize the repercussions of their action, and when they do, the only thing that will remain is immense guilt and a sin deep enough that atonement is going to be a very difficult and painful path, but even then, sins can no longer be washed away. Said Naruto as he took a deep breath before deciding to continue. Let's say we manage to capture him, he will only be tortured for eternity and suffer for the rest of his life, because you and I know that Yamamoto-sensei will not let him walk away with just a slap on the wrist. Said Naruto, which Shunsui understood. His sensei hated traitors the most, and Tencent was going to be at the receiving end of his sensei pent-up anger that had been held for years. When you put it that way, I think I can understand where you're coming from. Said Shunsui. He knew how much anger Yamajai was holding over the years, he knew nothing good will come from an enraged and an overpowered old man who is too stubborn to listen to anything other than turning his target into a toast. The only thing we should be even more concerned about is sensei taking our heads and mounting it on his office. Said Naruto calmly, making Shunsui spit his sake in surprise. What makes you say that? Asked Shunsui, being concerned since Naruto had good intuition so most of his predictions had come true. It's been practically 5 days since the Ryoka walked into our territory and up until now the one causing the most ruckus is still running around messing with everyone. Ichigokurosaki took down several of our unseated and seated officers before he targeted Lieutenant Aburai and later Kenpachi himself, and he won. Naruto recounted the damage done to the Sirete, while Shunsui started realizing what Naruto was trying to say. If another captain were to lose to the Ryoka, well, do I really need to say it? Asked Naruto as he smirked at Shunsui, whose face turned pale. Shit, Yamajai will definitely lose his shit. Now I'm dreading our next meeting after this whole situation is over. It's kind of embarrassing now when I think about it, for us captains to start losing against an amateur Soul Reaper. I doubt most of us would be able to look in his eyes. He will scold us for getting rusty over the years and not honing our skills like we were supposed to be doing. Commented Shunsui. He definitely dreaded that day. If another captain were to be defeated, then the title of captain would be a total joke. Yamajai had only allowed for the captains to deal with the Ryoka since he wanted to save face. If captains were to start struggling as well, then this might actually turn into a bloodbath after the whole Aizen fiasco is over with. This whole Ryoka invasion could end if I decided to interfere, but if I'm being honest, I'd rather sit back and watch everything unfold, said Naruto as he looked at the balcony that gave a view of the Sirete. Everyone had gotten comfortable in the peace and prosperity that we are currently experiencing, and due the record of Soul Reaper, always remaining undefeated over the countless centuries, and everyone had started to get arrogant and overconfident that they would always remain victorious. Many people need a lesson in humility if we were to ever hope to survive against Aizen and our future enemies. Said Naruto, which Shunsui smiled at. Yamamoto may have been a very stubborn old man, but he had taught them valuable lessons that shaped each of them to who they are today. Naruto, being the youngest among them, had a better vision for the future. He always thought about the safety of Soul Society. Unlike most others, he doesn't believe himself to be indestructible and believes that there is still room for improvement and learning. This is why Naruto was considered to be one of the most popular and admired Soul Reapers in the Soul Society, even more popular than Byakuya Kichiki himself, which is a testament to Naruto's influence. Naruto had been creating techniques and honing his basic skills to the limit. It reached a point that the Shin Academy had used Naruto's name to motivate the young students to emulate a strong role model. He kind of envied Naruto since his cute junior was really good with women. He remember walking one time with Naruto on the streets of the Sirete, and they ended up being swallowed by beautiful women that were screaming his name and asking for autographs. Especially that beautiful chick with those big knockers who was daring enough to ask Naruto for an autograph on her bosoms. As if reading what Shunsui was thinking, Naruto let out a small smirk on his face. Hey, don't give me that look. I think you're pretty handsome yourself, you have that flamboyant air around you that no woman can resist," said Naruto, which made Shunsui smile brightly. "Oh Naruto, my cute junior, saying such words to little old me. Nana-chan has been so mean to me lately," said Shunsui in a little dramatic way which made Naruto chuckle at the guy. It was a fact that the lieutenant of Squad 8 is the one that manages the squad. It reached a point that some even started to call her captain because of how strict she is on them and on the captain that was supposed to be her own superior. "Well, you can give her a gift or something. Just give her something she might like," said Naruto, which Shunsui had already planned to do since it was a way to get on her good side. It was kind of a pity seeing a captain trying too hard to appease his own lieutenant instead of the opposite. "You know, it's really nice to have a drink with somebody. That Ryoka kid had rejected my attempt at inviting him for a drink," said Shunsui, which Naruto had already heard about. Well, from your own description, he seems to be the gentle type who doesn't fight unless it's for others' sake. He probably had it rough growing up. Humans tend to like taking down those that are imposing to gain some sense of satisfaction in their own strength," said Naruto, which Shunsui nodded, having come up to the same conclusion. "It's really sad. I sometimes wish people could stop resorting to violence and be more friendly. This world will be a better place for everyone if people start to understand each other," said Shunsui, that Naruto had remembered Jiraiya's ambition for peace. "I don't really believe that much in peace. I think that it's only a temporary ceasefire where each nation readies themselves to attack once more when the other drops their guard," said Naruto, which Shunsui turned to listen to Naruto, feeling a little bad for the boy who was betrayed by his friend. "Although, over the years I had thought about the concept of peace. It's not impossible to have lasting peace, but that would require an extreme measure. It's like telling a kid to be careful while holding the knife so he doesn't cut his fingers, but do you think he'll listen?" asked Naruto, as Shunsui listened silently to Naruto. "He won't listen unless in two conditions, the first being that the parents would punish their child so they don't do it, but that would be almost tyrannical, and the child would eventually rebel against the parents, similar to how revolution had started because of the abuse that they suffered under the higher-ups' tyranny," said Naruto as he took a deep breath, taking another drink from the cup of sake before he pressed forward. "The only second option is to let the child himself try and come to his own decision after he finds himself with an injury. He won't ever repeat the same mistake of holding a knife because his wounds will be a reminder of how much pain it had inflicted on his body," said Naruto, as Shunsui listened in amazement. "The same thing applies to us. We're like a child holding a knife, not even knowing how dangerous it is, but once that knife start to hurt us, people will be repulsed by it and would avoid it. This in turn would create understanding because a lot of people are affected, as such people would grow appreciative of what they have and would avoid anything that would bring them harm, whether in an emotional level or physical level," finished Naruto, as Shunsui couldn't help the admiration for Naruto. Naruto was right, he could now understand why he was refusing to help take down the Ryoka. It's not because he can't, but rather he wants this to be a lesson for everyone. Those who were defeated by the Ryoka will realize how weak they are, how arrogant they were, and would start changing for the better. It might be slow, but they have a century to see it through. They might even achieve peace with Naruto and the younger generation around. Change will eventually happen whether Yamajai likes it or not. "I really suck at card games," commented Shunsui, which Naruto smirked at as he had been losing all the games so far. "How about we go gambling after this whole Ryoka invasion is over?" offered Naruto, which Shunsui grinned at. "Well, how can I refuse? You're a fortune kid," commented Shunsui, laughing as he was definitely in a mood for gambling, but that will be in the future. Sherm was having a mental crisis after his talk with Naruto that managed to calm him down. He returned immediately to his squad barracks, where his childhood friend is being held as a prisoner. He didn't know how long he would be keeping her behind bars, but she was a flight risk at the moment. He didn't want to chance it, especially with how unstable she is. Sherm shuddered at what could have been her mental state had he not come up with that excuse of having Momo around to motivate Ranjiku to take her job as a lieutenant seriously. Not only did he manage to have Momo be dependent on him as well, but for his own sanity, as he needed someone to deal with Ranjiku, and Momo was the one who could manage to force Ranjiku to work without needing to shout. He didn't want to know how it worked since he assumed it was just women's power to understand each other. That aside, Momo had recently tried to escape her cell by putting one of his unseated officers in a kidum spell, which is Hakifuku. The spell was meant to leave the guard unconscious before she makes a hole in the wall to escape in order to probably find Jin and kill him. Due to his paranoia being at an all-time high, he had already intercepted her before she could make it outside the Squad 10 barracks and captured her. She had obviously tried to reason with him, hoping that he would understand how she felt, but Sherm was afraid for her own safety. Poor Momo didn't know that she was being manipulated from the very beginning. In order to stop her from ever pulling such a stunt, he decided to target her admiration towards Aizen by claiming that he wouldn't want his own lieutenant to throw her life away needlessly, which is what was needed for him to calm her down. He was relieved that she had listened even though he hated to use Aizen's name to calm her down. Momo had obviously started sobbing in his chest as he took time to comfort her and listen to her. He had been doing this for the past several decades, he would always encourage her to talk to him if there was anything bothering her. This in turn had established a trust and a powerful bond between the two of them, and he appreciated it greatly, which is why for his own sanity, he didn't want her to run outside, especially with how dire the situation really is. After listening to her, he decided to seal her spiritual pressure despite a protest. Her mastery over Kidm is very annoying to him, he doesn't want her to go outside and die at the hands of people who aren't going to think twice about her own feelings. Momo was like a delicate flower that can be easily torn apart and stepped upon. He doesn't like treating her like a glass, but Momo had always wanted peace, so if she were to ever learn the truth or if someone were to use her own feelings against her, she would break down. Captain? Ranjiku spoke softly as she looked at her captain who was gripping his head. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Asked Mshirm. Ranjiku may not know what is actually happening since if she had ever learned that Jin was a traitor, she would probably be in a similar state as Momo, but much more better since Jin hadn't manipulated her, nor did he have her be dependent on him like Aizen had done to Momo. That aside, Ranjiku looked at her captain with pity. She had understood how he felt, which is why she had walked towards him and gave him a comforting smile. I think you've done the right thing both as a captain of the Gate 13 and as her childhood friend. Said Ranjiku, which gave some relief to Mshirm that he wasn't doing anything wrong. How is she doing? Asked Mshirm, having assigned Ranjiku to be the one to keep watch over Momo. He believed that with the friendship that was created during her several stay in the squad barracks, that Momo would remain docile and would start to get accustomed to the fact that her captain is dead. He just hopes when Aizen is revealed to be a traitor, that she would take it much better. She's doing quite well, sealing her Riatsu was a good choice since now that she can't break her way through the walls of the barracks and put her life into unnecessary risk. She's a little upset over the situation of sealing her Riatsu, but after a little talk, she understood your position and hopes that you would visit her sooner to talk things out. Said Ranjiku, which brought him relief. Right now, you're the closest thing to her. Aside from the now deceased Captain Aizen, there is no one else she could lean on for comfort. I suspect she might also be afraid that you would be targeted and killed just like her captain. Ranjiku added as Mshirm let out a sigh, it seems that Naruto had predicted right. That's a good thing, he had established himself as her second pillar that she could lean onto for comfort. At least, things were looking up. Hopefully things don't screw themselves even more than they should. We should keep her in the squad barracks for the time being and avoid having her wander outside until the execution day of Rukia Kichiki. Said Mshirm, which Ranjiku had understood and nodded at. Understood, Captain, said Ranjiku, having been contaminated by Momo's diligent nature and had started to put some effort into working, but some habits can't be fully wiped away, so she still often shirks her duties and drinks sake with the other lieutenant of other squads. Still progress is still progress in Mshirm's eyes. Mshirm then turned to the stack of papers that belonged to Squad 5, now with the squad leadership being empty and with the second in command being in a bad mental state to lead the squad in place of her deceased captain. It was up to him as her childhood friend to make sure that Squad 5 would survive by the end of the whole ordeal. Hopefully, a new captain would be picked to lead the squad since he doesn't think that he can tolerate having to do his own duties as a captain, his lazy lieutenant paperwork and Squad 5 paperwork. He could already see Aizen laughing at him and his own suffering, he was definitely going to at least run his sword through the guy's chest for all the shit he had put him through over the years. The idea of impaling Aizen did sound appealing to the young captain and he was going to give it a try. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching, if you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day, bye.